ارون, Roy, thank you for joining me on Upfront. Tensions between India and Pakistan are at their highest for decades. A lot of your fellow Indians would say that you should be standing with your country, with your government, with your Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. But you've come out against him again. Why?
Well, I've always been against Prime Minister Modi, even at the time he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat in 2002. But right now, I feel that, you know, he has been extremely reckless in what he did by doing those sort of symbolic airstrikes after the Pulwama attack. India and Pakistan became the first two nuclear powers to bomb each other, to put the whole world into jeopardy because of a problem that they have not just been unable to solve, but have actually been perpetuating for so long. And that problem is in Kashmir.
You've also said that Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, quote, acted with dignity and rectitude throughout this crisis. Many others around the world have praised Prime Minister Khan as well. But shouldn't he also be held responsible, a lot of Indians would say, for being in charge of a country that has failed to crack down on groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed, which took responsibility for that attack on Indian personnel? Just a week after the attack, a global financial watchdog said that Pakistan still, even under Imran Khan, is not doing enough to stop the funding of terrorism and money laundering and the rest.
Yeah, well, I was only speaking about that particular moment when we could have flashed into war. You know, I was not commenting on Pakistan's role in the whole Kashmir dispute, which is a complicated one, and of course, you know, to take action against groups like the Jaish is a responsibility of Pakistan. But you know, history did not begin with Pulwama in Kashmir. So I think we need to look at that the whole world needs to turn its attention to Kashmir because we are in a very, very dangerous situation there.
Isn't the problem, though, that the rest of the world is more concerned about nuclear war than about the plight of the Kashmiris?
Well, I mean, if they care about nuclear war, then they'll have to care about the Kashmiris, you know. And frankly, it's not just that they care about nuclear war. Here, you're looking at an economy like India and a country like Pakistan, both great buyers of weapons and, you know, things that keep that military-industrial complex in the West ticking. So there are very serious reasons for why people have looked away. But now with this, I don't think you can look away anymore.
Just on the Indian press and the conflict in Kashmir, how much is the Indian media and the very nationalistic cable news channels that we see from afar, how much do you think that's to blame for all this tension and hostility? Are Indian journalists complicit in ramping up some of these tensions?
Well, they are more than complicit. Sometimes they are literally calling for war. I mean, you had a major television anchor saying, we don't want condemnation, we want blood. You know, one of the most terrifying things in India now is that you have something like 400 24-hour news channels. I mean, even if this government falls, those media channels will remain and openly lying, publishing fake news, knowing that it's fake news. Some of those channels are owned by weapons dealers who have a vested interest. Most are owned by major corporates. The biggest corporation in India owns 27 24-hour news channels, you know. And so the conflict of interest is unbelievable.
Let's talk about what's happening on the ground in Indian-administered Kashmir in particular. The suicide bomber at the center of this recent escalation, Adil Ahmed Dar, he was reportedly humiliated by police officers while in school. He was shot in the leg during violent 2016 protests. When he joined a group of fighters in March 2018, his family told reporters, and the Indian military's response was to raid their home, set it on fire. Now, no one's justifying what he did, But how different would the reaction in India be to his story if more people knew about his story and more people knew about what's happening on the ground in Indian administered Kashmir?
There's nothing special about that story. That's the story of average young Kashmiri men. And that's why everything is so dangerous. You know, it's not, what I'm saying is beyond the question of posturing and condemnation and nationalism now. You did have senior journalists saying we can have a limited nuclear war. For heaven's sake, I mean, in Punjab, the peasants burn their crops. You can't breathe in Delhi. And they're talking about limited nuclear war. It's a situation of absolute lunacy.
And what is your position on Kashmir? Are you for independence?
You know, I am nobody to say what should happen to Kashmir. My position is that Kashmiris should be given a chance to express their opinion fearlessly. What do they want? Why are we so scared of that?
No, I get that they should have the final say, but you're not just a novelist, of course. You're a political analyst. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you do?
To me, if I could wave a magic wand, I would say that you need to demilitarize and you need to ask the people that have been fighting since 1947, what is it that they want? You know, why have 70,000 people died? Why are hundreds of teenagers been blinded? Why have so many people been tortured? For what? Why are people willing to kill themselves? Why are civilians willing to come in the way of bullets when the army cordons off a militant and people just throw themselves in the path of danger? Why?
So just to be clear, if the Kashmiris did get a vote and they voted for independence from India and from Pakistan, let's say, you would support that? You would say you're not opposed to breaking up that part of India?
Look, I'm not any kind of person who believes in the sanctity of maps. I mean, if Indians believe that it's all right for them to intervene in Bangladesh and to separate what was then East Pakistan from West Pakistan and liberate that place, which was being assaulted. There was genocide being committed in Bangladesh. If Indians believe that that's okay, then in what way do they justify their position on Kashmir?
You've been accused by your army of right-wing critics in India of being, among other things, an apologist for militant groups in Kashmir, as well as India's Maoist fighters too. You once said, "I do feel it's incredible that these poor people are standing up against this mighty state." What is your position on minority groups taking up arms against the Indian government, which for all its sins and flaws is an elected government?
Well, you know, I ask those people, like, if you go to the to the villages as I have been, deep into the forests of central India, 4 or 5 days walk from the main road, where you have vigilante armies raised by the government plus paramilitary forces surrounding indigenous people's villages, burning them down, raping the women, chasing people off the land in their tens of thousands. What do you want those people to do? In the middle of the forest, go on a hunger strike when they're already starving? What do you expect them to do? You know, obviously, I'm not just suggesting that everybody picks up arms and starts shooting people. You know, but if there's non-violent protest, it's not allowed. If there's armed resistance, it's not allowed. All of us are supposed to be okay with that and maintain the status quo. Sorry. You know?
India's elections begin in just a few weeks. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has exploited the recent crisis with Pakistan. We're seeing a lot of nationalism, xenophobia on the part of government ministers. Is he going to get re-elected with this kind of rhetoric and campaign, do you think?
Quite honestly, I don't think so, because the situation here is that everything is in crisis. Farmers are in crisis, universities are in crisis, banks are in crisis, courts are in crisis. I don't think it's going to work unless something else happens, and something else may well happen.
You have said in the past that the opposition party, the Congress party, has, quote, done by night what the BJP, Modi's party, does by day. 5 years into this Modi era, is that really still your view of Congress, that they're basically all the same?
That's a very tough question to answer, because one looks back at the history of what the Congress has done and you do shudder. However, Modi is not the problem. Modi is a representative of the most powerful organization in India, the RSS, with hundreds of thousands of volunteers. It's the cultural guild that controls the BJP. It was set up in 1925. It has always maintained that the Indian constitution is a foreign constitution. It has always maintained that India should be declared a Hindu nation. So now we are in that sort of crisis.
And the RSS's politics and Modi's politics, would you call that the Hindutva politics? Would you call that kind of politics fascist?
Well, the RSS itself, its own ideologues have written so much in praise of Hitler, in praise of Mussolini, have called Muslims second-class citizens, have called Christians and communists their enemies. If you look at the games that have been played, the false flag attacks, the trail of deaths, of murders, of lynchings, you see fascism. What else do you see?
Isn't the really big problem for you and people who are opposed to Modi is that Modi still has the support, according to the recent polls, of the majority of Indians? You're in a minority as a critic of his. Isn't that the big problem?
It's a problem, but the thing is that majoritarianism and fascism only have an osmotic wall between them. So in the last elections, they proved that they didn't need Muslims. In this election, they're going to try and prove they don't need Dalits. And, the caste equations in India is something we haven't spoken about, but caste is the engine that runs this country. And I don't believe, Modi didn't come to power with the majority of the votes anyway, but there are thousands of people in jail today. The killers of Gujarat, people who have been held guilty of massacring, 90 people, let's say Naroda Patian in 2002, Babu Bajrangi, who was convicted and who actually openly boasted on camera that he slit open a pregnant Muslim woman's stomach, recently been released on bail, whereas human rights lawyers, professors, activists, indigenous people in their hundreds are in jail.
And you yourself were imprisoned in the past for your protests against the Narmada dams. You've been very outspoken in your criticisms of both parties, of the military, of police forces, of violence. You've been criticized for that, obviously. You've been smeared. You get death threats. Do you worry for your life, Arundhati?
I'm obviously careful. I am somebody who's protected by my readers in some ways. That's all the protection that I have. But it's happening to so many people, People have been killed. Of course, Gauri Lankesh and so many others have been killed. So it would be silly to say, oh, I don't worry at all. But all of us worry. All of us are careful. All of us step back sometimes. All of us try to live in this country in the most intelligent way that we can and say what we can, how we can, when we can.
Arundhati Roy, thanks for joining me on Upfront.
You're welcome.